Web3, a new frontier of the internet that changes how we interact with technology. Although still in its infancy, it's already disrupting a range of sectors from finance through art to gaming. Web 3.0 is open, trustless, permissionless, and decentralized in its nature. But what do we know about the technology at its core? Meet Aleph Zero, a proof-of-stake public blockchain with private smart contracts designed to drive the Web3 adoption. Its protocol can empower businesses, governments, and developers in finding new use cases for decentralized architecture. During our live session, we would like to introduce you to the founders of Aleph Zero and investigate the current state of Web3, along with its long-term future. We will also explore the role of blockchain in powering the new iteration of the internet, talk about decentralized privacy, and explain how 10Clouds developers have helped with building the Aleph Zero infrastructure. Welcome to 10Clouds Voices on how blockchain is driving the shift to Web3.
Hello. That was so horrible. Hey guys, welcome at another session of 10C Voices. I think number 3 right now. I want to welcome my lovely guests, Antoni and Adam.
Hello. Pleasure being here.
Thank you for joining from the lovely Kraków, as I understand it, which used to be
straight to Warsaw. Correct.
Yeah, it's great to have you here, and I really appreciate your time joining us for this specific and special event. To give a bit more context, Aleph Zero, COO, CTO, you guys have been at it for years. We met, I think, 4 years ago at a conference in Warsaw.
Swiss Polish Blockchain Association conference. And I think Golem was there as well, and several other parties. And then we went for a coffee, and hence we're here. That's how things work.
That was the first point of magic. Since then, we haven't spoken until 6 years ago, or 6 months ago, where we got to get in touch, where we started the initial collaboration between 10Clouds and Aleph Zero. And the reason that you're here and I'm here is because we want to kind of share a bit more about the story, because you guys launched the mainnet 1 month ago, I believe. You successfully raised funds, and you're one of the more mature companies at the same time out there in the Web 3.0 industry as of now. Before we go into all those elements, maybe you could tell me a bit more for anyone who's new to Aleph Zero, what you guys do and where you're going to.
Okay, so maybe before handing off to Adam, as far as the the technology bits, I would say that we're maybe one of the more mature companies in Poland when it comes to blockchain. But I wouldn't say that we're one of the most mature companies across the space, because you've got, Web3 Foundation, you've got players that have been at it for a long time, and we're simply just building on top of what has been deployed already and trying to make it even more efficient. And as far as what we're trying to do is a new type of a public blockchain with privacy enhancing features. And effectively, with the entire multi-chain world narrative, where you have multiple chains all building towards the adoption of Web3, what we're looking to do is have something interesting both for developers who are looking to build directly on top of Aleph Zero, as well as the ones that are focused on their own chains, but are looking for privacy enhancing features. And that's where our privacy bridges come in, that are being designed right now, and we're looking at deploying them in 2022, hopefully.
Fingers crossed. And related to that, also one question to the audience, if you're listening in. It's going to be interactive. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments. And at the end of this interview, we'll also make sure to address them, depending on what the question is going to be. So as 10Clouds, we're working with a lot of, let's say, individuals as much as companies that have ideas of entering this space. And I'm kind of curious because you originally both come from, let's say, an extensive IT background, both from either the marketing or IT side. What initially brought you to the idea of starting Aleph Zero, that 4 or 5 years ago, I believe?
3.5.
3.5 years.
Almost 4 now.
Yeah.
It's like closer to 4. Yeah.
Should celebrate. I'm sure when.
Yeah, we should. So the project, of course, changed its direction a bit in the time span of the last 4 years. So we started. Actually, we kind of grew out of academia. We started because we started with solely the consensus protocol, which is the heart of the blockchain. So initially, we didn't plan privacy features just yet. We just wanted to improve what we believed back then was the main problem with the blockchain space. That was the speed and the throughput of blockchains that existed that days. And actually, it's still kind of a problem, as anyone who follows Ethereum surely knows. The transaction cost is about 100 zloty per transaction, or at the best days, so $30.
When America isn't awake yet. Yeah.
Yeah. So there are already deployed blockchains which at least partially elevate the problem, which is, for example, Solana or AVAX and Terra. So initially, what we designed was a consensus protocol, which was significantly faster and still is than other protocols. So we aimed at very, very low transaction latency. So we still we are below 1 second at most of the times when it comes to transaction finalization. And currently, I'm not aware of any other big project with such times. So this used to be our defining feature for years. Right now, we are targeting privacy because we believe that this is something that is missing and that's going to be very needed in the upcoming future. So the whole Web3 idea, as we see it right now, is based on this decentralized blockchains rather than private blockchains. I think we're gonna get into this distinction a bit deeper, perhaps later. But how we see Web 3.0 is we would really like it to be built around projects like Ethereum, which are basically not centralized around several chosen identities, chosen players, but rather anyone can get in and become a validator, and then projects build upon this decentralized environment. So what's problematic right now is that there is very little technology which would allow build anything with any privacy features on a decentralized platforms. By design, everything which goes on Ethereum is public to everyone in the world.
Yeah, basically, if you know the wallet address, you are connected to the person. You're able to figure out what they do, basically.
Yeah, if I pay you for anything, you can pick into my wallet. This is a very weird property of blockchain. I mean, very weird property. We don't want that financial systems should not work like that, and it not only financial systems.
Unless it's a public institution, then that's, for instance, beneficial, right? But
transparency is good for sure, and that's actually something we would like to stay in Web 3.0. But healthy level of privacy is definitely what's needed to be reasonably useful and compliant. Actually, when it comes to more advanced products.
And especially because, as I understand it, your focus is not necessarily purely on the consumer, but especially also on the enterprise and large institutes to be able to enter the market, going away from this kind of very private atmosphere and using the right components of what Web3 offers. Do I say that correctly?
We're infrastructure guys, so yes, we are building infrastructure for businesses to build upon, or at least we're building part of the infrastructure for businesses to build upon. So When it comes to the questions, the answer is, I would say, yes.
Yeah, two major development directions. I would say first one is DeFi, and the second one is building an alternative for enterprises or SMBs to choose from, essentially. And the thing is that there's this word trustless in blockchain that's being thrown around quite often, and to a regular person it has negative connotations. In this case, it just means that trust is not needed in order to interact with the platform or execute the transaction. And I think that what we've been trying to do through, peer reviewing Adam and Michael's and the two Damians that we have in the team, their work during an ACM conference, and presenting it there through a security audit with Trail of Bits, that this is a viable alternative, I would say, from this trust, but from this trust standpoint. Yeah,
that makes sense. And from that perspective, you started this almost 4 years ago. What was the standpoint that you were deciding? Because it's a risky market, especially 3.5 to 4 years ago. It was a very early entry.
Yeah.
What made you decide to say, or at least for, let's say, the more mainstream started to get into play? What was the decisive factor that you were like, you know what, we're going to full-time invest our time and set something up that will solve the issues related to transaction fees, the speed of transactions, and we're going to dedicate all of our time and investment into it? Because it's a big move, especially then.
I wouldn't say it was, these were not early days. Perhaps for Web 3.0, like no one was using this term back then. But I wouldn't say it was early days of blockchain. But it was perhaps the first big bull run 4 years ago. So everyone was crazy about blockchain back then. Not about the DeFi, not about Web 3.0. Like basically, perhaps the term Web 3.0 hasn't even coined back then, or definitely was not used. DeFi perhaps, but it was not a big thing. But blockchain as such, for sure. So it was pretty clear that the infrastructure for simple transfer, which has a reasonable throughput and high speed, is needed. So I don't see this as an especially bold move. It was not super early days when it comes to just consensus protocol and just blockchain.
Yeah. I mean, there was Web3 Foundation set up. So that's the foundation that by Gavin Wood, so the founder of also Polkadot and one of the co-founders of Ethereum. But the term itself has not been widely used, and it certainly back then at least didn't encompass all that Web3 aims to become or already is. So metaverses, NFTs, blockchains.
Yeah.
And I think also back then the biggest dilemma was deciding whether we're a crypto organization or a blockchain organization or a DLT organization. It's just naming, really. There are differences, of course, but from an outsider's point of view, not really.
And so going from that perspective, where do you see that you, as a company, but maybe even more the market, will be heading towards from a Web 3.0 or DLT perspective in upcoming 10 to 15 years? So you mentioned a maturity being already slightly there, let's say 4 years ago. Now we're 4 years later. It felt like it went like this. Where do you feel it's heading to? Easy question.
Okay. I strongly believe that we're going to continue pursuing this ownership culture, I would say, and online, meaning that, an example from like literally, I think 2 days ago, when New York Times described that the metaverse handle has been taken away from a user and assigned to, let's say, a certain entity. So this is a prime example of what ownership online means, that those things are never really yours, they're just rented in Web 2.0, which is to some extent fine, and the technological advancements of the last 10 years, especially for the consumer market, are insane. But going forward, this is also adhering to the very principles of open culture and open science that the original internet, let's say, was built upon. And here you're looking at projects that are owned by communities and not large entities, and that benefit a wider group of people instead of few selected individuals.
And what would be the ideal state for Aleph Zero to be within, let's say, that those 10 to 15 years? Like, what will be your goal to reach from the point that you are right now, knowing that it will probably iterate over time?
Go for it.
Yeah, this is a rather hard question, but say right now we don't think about ourselves as targeting any specific niche or trying to get over the market. We don't believe that there's going to be one infrastructure project that will just take over. It used to be so in the early days. Personally, I don't think it's going to be like that anymore. Like, never. So how do we see us? Well, I think we see the whole space as some rather collaborative effort of multiple different projects. So we definitely want to be a part of it. We want to explore the privacy angle, which we believe to be gaining in importance and definitely be important in the future. And I think we would like to be widely used as a privacy provider for various use cases, preferably not enclosed in one domain. The more the better.
Because that is also, I believe, one of the areas that you work a lot on right now, as I understand, is the next step is indeed that privacy layer that doesn't need to be specifically tied to Aleph Zero. And also this kind of DeFi network or this amount of DeFi applications that you would build around it, correct? That's one of the next steps.
Yeah, so I think, Aleph Zero in general is okay, but it's a general purpose platform, right? So you've got a plethora of possible use cases that can build on top of it. And our assumption was always to sort of build the best infrastructure we can, and then after we're also ready to serve developers and offer them enough support to some extent follow the market. So we're building like the sandbox, right? And therefore also closing this entire project or making it focus on a single vertical is not the way to go. At least that's how we see it. And with at least several projects actually solving the challenges of the existing networks, like scalability and the general performance standpoint. We also wanted to add to the mix and focus on privacy, because we strongly believe that individual privacy as well as the enterprise privacy, if they were to deploy on a public chain, is crucial, and it will become even more viable. Yeah. Of course, there are multiple ethical dilemmas associated with hardcore privacy, especially in the financial sector. But this is something that we will be also addressing as far as giving the control away providing the control to the users. And if, say, they make the decision to disclose something, they obviously can.
I understand. And then going from that perspective, we started talking 6 months ago, of course, as well. Knowing that those scaling needs were there at the moment that you were about to launch towards mainnet and the funds were closing down. What was, let's say, your decision process that you were like, oh God, this is a moment where we might need to talk with 10Clouds and with Dennis again? What made you sit with us and what made you think like, okay, 10Clouds is potentially someone that could help doing this?
We were preparing to launch the mainnet, and definitely needed more DevOps support. Just to help with AWS. Michael would be perfect to answer that question. So as a humanist, I'm going to do my best.
Okay.
And generally speaking, from a business standpoint, it was easier to contact Dennis and 10Clouds, Dennis being you and
Thank you for being them.
Yeah, so it was easier to rely on your support from the DevOps perspective than recruiting, finding, and then bringing new colleagues to the team at this very sensitive time, I would say.
Yeah.
Back then, we've been also not so sure about how this need will develop, and so it was definitely clear that we require some help before the launch of the mainnet to help us with setting up the infrastructure. It was not entirely clear whether we're gonna need entire workforce for longer. So we definitely preferred it to be more agile, and so it was very, very convenient for us to work with you guys rather than find someone because we haven't been sure whether we can actually promise like
continuous work
for years to come. Right now, it actually looks like that. Well, yes, probably we can, but I guess
it just works. It's so. Assuming the team is they're also just great guys. I think that one of and that's also one of the feedback that we get is that they honestly just really enjoy like the culture that you have is just very, let's say, low level. So and it's also one of the things I actually noticed. I followed your Telegram for quite a while. Is that it's not a kind of like them us kind of atmosphere that you're creating, and it's something very beautiful. Is that as let's say the founding team, you are quite heavily engaged, and I believe that to actually be one of the virtues of the whole, let's say, communication and the way they see your brand as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we've been aiming for, I would say, because just as anybody else in the industry, we're still learning what it's all about, and we're still trying to build products that are going to be used by people, and for products to be used by people, you want to get their feedback on this, and you want to build like actual relationships with them. Because like we're all sort of in the same bucket, I would say, and there's really no difference between us and the overall community. Although that might be hard to scale with that approach, so I'll admit that. But for now, I think we can continue doing what we were doing, and we also expanded our community moderation team with some amazing people from Brazil and Australia. Yeah, they're absolutely great, and yeah.
And one of the biggest dilemmas for anyone entering this market is actually one thing is having a product that is good and solid and that is feedback by the market as something they need. But secondly is building that community part. What was for you the biggest challenge in kind of setting a community around Aleph Zero next to the great marketing efforts that you have? I'm not sure, but you might be able to see it, but we're branding the Aleph Zero socks here as well, which are quite amazing, to be fair. But what are other ways that you build up the community for Aleph Zero?
So you've got multiple ways of approaching this, and we've always focused on like my personal one and true love, which is organic and inbound approach as much as possible. Of course, you might want to boost your visibility sometimes, but this organic route obviously takes longer to first implement and second to actually see the benefits of it. But you end up with actual interest and people who are more likely to be with the project team for the long run. So as far as challenges, well, I think the major ones are yet to come, to be honest.
It's kind of the next step in the process. Yeah. And so one of the questions that we have seen rising up, and also one of the questions that therefore I would love to ask, because it creates confusion, is this private versus privacy, especially within Aleph Zero. There is the public blockchain with the private smart contracts and the privacy layer. So what would you see? And it covers all the aspects that are a need. There's a reason behind it. So what is the main, what we say is the main difference, or how should we distinct those two, private and privacy within
I think the word which is missing here is transparency. So private is opposite to transparent, while privacy is not opposed to transparency, at least as we see it.
Okay.
So transparency here I understand as property of a process. Process can be transparent, but the data which goes into the process can be private. So this is something that we're aiming for. Having a public blockchain, which is public in the sense that anyone can verify the process by which it operates, allows for a very high degree of transparency. So whatever you deploy on this blockchain, anyone will be able to verify. So it will be trustless in the sense that there will be no trust in any single entity required to believe that the given product, feature, or whatever works as intended. But that doesn't mean that as a user of this product or feature, you cannot have your data privately processed. Yes, you can. You can have a transparent process which processes private data without revealing them. That's what we mean by private smart contract on a public chain. Private chain, on the contrary, are the chains which does not allow public validators. They just have certain chosen authorities which operate the chain, so no one from outside this group can peek into the process. So the process is not transparent in this sense.
Okay. And if you look at it in that sense, what will be the first, let's say, industry or potentially the first use case that you would like to focus on in upcoming, let's say, 6 to 12 months? Is there a specific area where you see the adaptation for some
structure
like this the most relevant?
Decentralized finance, of course. DeFi,
for sure. And I think you're actually building right now the first product that would suit very well for it, right? In terms of a decentralized exchange.
Yeah, we've begun some time ago, and we've started the user interviews. We have like preliminary designs ready. We do have a technological concept. We didn't start the implementation yet, but
we're kind of starting. It's ongoing. Yeah, it's an ongoing process here. So yeah, I should continue from that.
And what would you say is the knowing, let's say, where it's going to be based and built upon, how do you see that DEX differently from, let's say, other decentralized exchanges that will be out there? Like where would we see the obvious, let's say, differences for anyone that is looking into potentially being in this market or buying tokens?
So there are several qualities of decentralized exchanges which are not so widely explored yet. One of them is operating with different chains. So majority of decentralized exchanges operate on just a single chain. And I think it's good to take one step back here to explain why actually people use decentralized exchanges. So like there can be several reasons. One of them is because some people doesn't like their funds to be in the hands of a centralized provider, but that's not the only reason. The other reason, which is very important here, is that decentralized exchanges allow for usually much higher degrees of automatization. So you can compose different decentralized financial instruments into one flow. That's very convenient for people who are looking to get into a specific position in finance. So right now, most of the times these things happen on a single chain, or otherwise you need to use a bridge as a separate instrument. That's inconvenient, that's hard. A lot of people just don't do it, and there is a lot of users which are just choosing one ecosystem, like Ethereum for the rich ones, or Solana, Terra for are the newcomers, which are getting a lot of traction these days.
Yeah.
So what is definitely missing are the instruments which allow users to interact with several chains. So definitely it's one of the angles we are heavily exploring, and we want to users to have a seamless experience of interacting with various chains in a way where they don't even need to think about using a bridge, or actually in the perfect scenario that they don't even need to know that there exists that Aleph Zero is a separate chain. I mean, that's like, yeah, this is the infrastructure. People don't necessarily need to think about the infrastructure of the products that they are using. So
it's about the convenience more, right?
Yeah. So this is definitely something we are very, very much interested in, like this kind of seamless experience of using several ecosystems. And the second thing, I'm gonna say it again, privacy. So privacy in DeFi exists to some extent, although these are the early days. There is a concept of a mixer, which has very bad connotations of some gangsters laundering their money inside.
You mean NFTs, right?
No, mixers have this is a pretty old concept. Like, I think they existed even before Ethereum was formed on Bitcoin. There was a concept of mixing funds. But for the long time, it had this bad connotations that, well, why would you need to anonymize your funds? Actually, I would say that everyone should anonymize their funds. It's not a healthy situation where anyone can peek into anyone else's wallet. That's not something we want to see in our financial system. We want privacy by default. And that's pretty much non-existent right now. It's very, very easy to peek into wallets of other users, and I think that people are getting aware of these situations and more and more. So the second aspect that we are exploring is how to make this financial operations, which are happening in DeFi right now, more private or privacy preserving.
And I think that one of the things, like you actually mentioned, is maybe not that clear to someone that might use whether it's a centralized or decentralized exchange, is that privacy part. What would you give generally as a tip to someone that is going in towards this space, knowing that privacy is an issue, knowing that there's too much transparency in that regard, and knowing the high transaction fees? Like, what are, say, 2 or 3 tips that you would give to someone that would want to invest in this space? Like, please make sure you do or you don't do when you would start going.
I guess if you're a beginner, please don't use Ethereum as your main platform, because you're gonna be ruined.
This constitutes a financial advice.
Of
There has to be a
100%. 100%.
Like,
invest time, make sure you advise yourself, research it.
I mean, there are multiple communities that help out with those first steps. The best ones are not paid, obviously, and these are just people with similar interests. So, as far as beginners, I think that, you know, the entire crypto space is a high risk market. Obviously, it's a young market that's extremely volatile from like an investor's perspective. And I don't think we should advise anybody. I mean, we're more about like the tech.
At least try to look further than just day trading different tokens.
That's for sure something. One of the things that is a big issue in this space is when you start a startup is, first of all, how do you make the right decisions on what technology do we want to use? What is kind of the principle of the product you're building, the scalability around it? What would be 3 tips based on your own experience that you would give to someone that is building right now their own product on top of Web 3.0? Maybe something that you yourself got trapped into some point, or something that you have seen yourself happening. What would you give as advice?
So I think we have extensive experience here when it comes to getting trapped in a solution. So I think the general advice would be that most probably you don't want to innovate in every aspect of what you do. Almost for sure you don't.
I see, right?
And also this entire Sphere is open source by default. Almost everything is open source here. So try to reuse things. Really, try to reuse things. Try to find a framework which does almost everything you need, and just put this one innovation that you are really interested in into this framework. It's gonna be 50 times faster to deploy than building everything from scratch.
But that's also what the space is about, like reusing stuff other people build, like the world really, but this space in particular, since everything's or most of the things are open source. And I also figured out an answer to that previous investment question, but I'm gonna let it go.
But it's a good. Well, one of the things that we, like you mentioned, happen is that basically people want to do too much at the same time, therefore stalling the actual, let's say, launch of their product, or they want to do too much.
It's pretty common, I think.
It's very common. One thing is like chasing too many innovations at once, and the other thing is there are certain areas where you don't want to innovate, you just need something. So please try to find open source solutions for that which already exists, rather than build everything from scratch. That's probably not the best way to get your MVP.
And in our case, we've got two areas where we actually innovate, and the first one is consensus. The second one is this privacy engine, because it combines two approaches that have not been combined before, at least to our knowledge, which would be zero knowledge proofs and secure multi-party computation. And it's all purely software based, will be purely software based. So these are the two major aspects of our focus, and according to most of the team, this is way more than enough for as far as innovation is concerned.
Yeah. And just as a tip for the audience, if you go to Aleph Zero website, there's a very I would say a very practical guide towards actually your project. It's like 30 pages, 33 pages, and it really nicely briefs as well a lot of the case and industries where this could be applied to, some of the products you're launching, and especially also this combination of this privacy layer that you're creating. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Now I'm gonna check what kind of questions we got from the audience, if any. Let's take a look. Ooh, oh God. Okay, that's so will you have, I'm just literally reading without knowing the end of this question, will you have any major incentive programs that will help jumpstart your ecosystem to compete with other L1s or first layer solutions?
Yes. So we're not ready yet to launch this, because we need proper documentation for developers. We need smart contracts operational on the testnet at least. And we need to have an organizational structure that allows for providing support to external developers as well, at least in some cases. We're also starting to design an ecosystem fund, which we're hoping is going to jumpstart the adoption.
Okay.
So generally, it's a gradual, complex process, I would say. We're already talking with several external developers and businesses that are looking to build on top of the platform. And yeah, I mean, definitely the first quarter of 2022, we'll have more details on that.
That's interesting. So that is something that you will build out throughout 2022. This initial.
That's the plan. Yeah.
Okay. That's actually.
I mean,
very,
not
yeah.
we're not gonna build an entire adoption, right? But the basis for it.
The basis for it.
Yeah.
And that brings actually back towards another question based on one of the earlier discussions we had, is do you suggest any other platforms than Ethereum? I think actually Polkadot is something that you're working on with, for example. Why that decision?
Do we suggest like for what?
Let's suggest
use case?
for
That's a
Open question.
question.
all right. So maybe we can turn this around, and like the platforms we like, or some or bridges.
do it
The
like
bridges. Let's go attack it from the bridges perspective. So we're gonna build bridges. I think the latest plan is to bridge to Luna and Terra.
So nothing is public yet when it comes to bridges.
We're censoring this. Didn't happen. Yeah, we it's live. Another question that came around from Neil. How are you guys trying to find your product market fit? So how do you validate your products, and what's, let's say, the process that you use?
Sure. By talking to people, like first and foremost. So we're talking to actual adopters. On the DeFi space, I think Adam can say a bit more about that. On the enterprise front, it's about identifying also potential non-financial use cases that can be applied to, that this technology can be applied for. So for instance, healthcare is an interesting one, but as far as actual deployments, I think we're looking at anything from 2 to 5 years onwards. But the MPC part of Aleph Zero is potentially very, very useful there as far as sharing patient data between hospitals, individuals, and for instance, municipalities is concerned.
Okay. And how do you kind of like, is it just like you have user interviews or you trial and error your product? What are ways that you could do it with those users, and where do you find those users?
We do have user interviews. It's not hard to find DeFi users usually, and so what we are trying to achieve with the interviews, we had before, for example, also interviews with validators to assess what are the expectations and how to set up a program for validators. Right now, we are shifting our entire attention into DeFi. So that's where we are conducting interviews. So what we are trying to get are several things. So one of them is we want to understand the flow of things by which these users operate. So how do they find products? What do they use it for? How do they use it? And what are their needs? And when it comes to needs, we are both interested in like the general needs, which means I want to be able to easily operate with 2 ecosystems at once, and a very small technical needs, like for example, I would like to be able to export my entire transaction history with 2 clicks rather than not be able at all, how it usually is right now. So yes, that's what comes up from the interviews usually.
Discovery is extensive.
Mm-hmm. I think though that the tough side is at one side, and like how do you kind of try to keep your head cool? Because I can imagine on a daily basis you're in the market, there is a new news popping up, there's a new hype there. How do you make sure that you're able to take that step back and try not to be influenced too much by the market itself, which is extremely tough?
I don't think it's possible. I mean, even if you don't read this, somebody's gonna tell you, so you're gonna learn about it either way. But
and where would you actually find, what is for you the best news source? This is actually something that pops up very often for anyone. It's like, should I go to like CoinDesk? Should I just get a Twitter account? What is the best way for you to be up to date?
Twitter, I think.
I don't tweet much, which
I'm trying to make Adam tweet.
I read a lot of Twitter.
He's not tweeting.
Yeah.
We can just have
But
a
he
account and
retweets
tweet somebody's name.
sometimes.
Yeah.
But Twitter is good. Although you have to also be mindful of shilling and sort of whisper promotional campaigns that are happening. But generally speaking, you get access to people and their point of view that you wouldn't normally get access to as easily. So it's like literally straight from the source.
It's like it's unfiltered, which is a good and a bad thing in a way. It makes a lot of sense. I think I have all the questions so far from everyone watching. Thanks for that. Really appreciate it. They were actually good questions. Like very, like I was like, oh, I should have asked that. Anyways, if anyone wants to get in touch with Aleph Zero, or they would like to get just like those amazing Aleph Zero socks, what is the best way to get in touch with you if they want to collaborate, if they want to understand more?
So on the socks, it's a trial run, and they have some defects, but we'll figure.
I don't even have them. Like
You don't even have?
No, I'm just literally just. I don't think we should be discussing socks. So,
but
they
okay, yeah. Well, yeah, we'll have to do some user validation. But if anyone would like to get in touch with you, what would be the best way if they have ideas or questions?
Discord, Twitter, email. I mean, we're quite easily reachable, I would say. Yeah.
So reach out at any time. And for
LinkedIn
now,
also, I guess.
LinkedIn.
I mean, we're on LinkedIn right now.
Twitter.
No. On Twitter as well.
Especially Adam on Twitter. You will definitely respond, as I understand.
Actually, I will. No one writes to me, or almost, because I don't.
So if you're right, you actually notice.
Yeah.
So here's a small tip. I want to thank you so much for your time. Again, I really appreciate for you to come over here. And again, just for answering very transparently all the questions. And for now, also the audience, thank you for joining in. Thanks for your questions. And that's a wrap of 10C Voices.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.